Chapter 1150 is turning out to be something monumental, not just in its revelations, but in the way it confirms many long-held suspicions. Chief among them, IMU is not human. But here's the real question. Were they ever human to begin with? The current developments, especially IMU's takeover of Ganko's body, only adds fuel to a fire that has been slowly kindling since the first hints of their existence. Gunko, a member of the Holy Knights, was always somewhat of a mystery. She is the only Holy Knight without the title of Saint. But her abilities and the ear-overlapping voices heard during IMU's anime debut had fans speculating for a while. Now, it's clear. The multiple voices weren't just a stylistic choice. They were a signal. IMU and Gunko are the same, or at least two facets of a singular power. Chapter 1149 showed us something incredible. Just as Gunko was about to remember Brook, IMU took over, and in doing so her body twisted and reshaped itself into something demonic. Bat-like wings, a pointed tail, a trident, and a dark haki that chilled the entire battlefield. This wasn't just possession, it was revelation. And then from the sea I saw the serpent rise, and he would deceive the nations. This was the first passage that hopped into my mind as I read this chapter. I believe this is from the book of Revelations. Actually, the arrow-shaped tail is a crucial clue. Back in chapter 1085, when Nefertari Cobra was stabbed, the silhouette that attacked him bore a similar tail. At the time, it was easy to dismiss as dramatic flair. But with hindsight, it all connects. The arrow wasn't symbolic, it was literal. IMU's tail, Ganko's arrow, one and the same. This is so weird, but it makes sense. I believe through the ages, IMU has found hosts to carry their will. But it's not just any host. There seem to be strict conditions, perhaps a particular bloodline or race. And maybe it just happens that this one girl that Brook had this interaction with, who comes from the kingdom that Brook acted as an escort for, it seems like the conditions require a certain bloodline indeed, someone maybe from IMU's original bloodline. Think of it like an ancient contract with specific clauses. That leads us to Blackbeard. For years, theorists have speculated about his ability to hold two devil fruits. Some say he has two souls, others such as Marco point to his unique body structure. But with what we've seen of IMU's powers, a new idea forms. What if Blackbeard is hosting the Earth God, just as Gunko hosts IMU? And you really have to take into account the fact that he really wanted the Gura Gura no Mi, and he went through all the trouble at Marineford just to get that devil fruit. And not to mention, Whitebeard never actually awakened that power. When you think about it in a logical way, who better to have the power to destroy the world than the Earth God himself? The power of the Quake fruit in the hands of the Earth God. It makes even more sense when you consider that in chapter 1149, the possession didn't seem entirely under IMU's control. It was involuntary, chaotic, almost like a separate consciousness breaking through. That aligns perfectly with characters like Cavendish, who switches to Hakuba. It's not always a choice. Sometimes it's random, but of course Hakuba is more of a result of a personality disorder than a demon possession. So imagine the terrifying possibility that IMU's possession, or the Earth God's power within Blackbeard, isn't fully understood or mastered by its host. That's why it's unstable. That's why it's dangerous. Now let's dig into the deeper lore. IMU's powers seem to include the ability to forcibly grant people powers and turn them into extensions of their will. They can transform people into monsters, into loyal demon kings, as seen with Dorian Brogy. This transformation isn't just physical, it's metaphysical. Brogy was stabbed, shot, then sank into the ground and rose again as something unrecognizable. Wings, horns, fangs, and all. The specific translation used by IMU is Oni, a Japanese demon, similar to the yokai transformations we saw from the Gorosei. The Devil's Contract, as it's now being called, might be less of a spell and more of an exchange, a pact with the devil, literally IMU. When we look at IMU's abilities, the mysterious book, the trident, and the overall aura of control, it strongly implies possession of something akin to a devil fruit power. The way IMU names these powers, especially the references tied to mythical artifacts, suggests these aren't just ordinary tools, but manifestations of a devil fruit's ability. But that would mean IMU was once human, since they would require a soul to possess a devil fruit power. And not to mention, that makes Gunko exactly like Blackbeard. That is, if we assume she holds a devil fruit ability, that would mean she technically has 2 devil fruits and not just one of the many gifts IMU bestows upon their followers. But here's the thing, right? Devil fruits are said to be objects containing the souls of actual devils, so it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume IMU is the first soul of those devils that we have seen actually retain its will and consciousness since the first age. I'll try and repeat this again. This fits nicely with the theory about Blackbeard hosting multiple souls, specifically the possibility that one of those is not just a power or devil fruit ability, but an actual demon or devil soul. If Gonko possesses a devil fruit power with an independent will, it aligns with the idea that devil fruits are vessels for devils themselves, spirits or entities that seek hosts to survive and enact their will. The implication here is huge. IMU is the embodiment of a serpent demon devil, a primordial entity that found a way to anchor itself permanently to the physical world through these fruits, or in their case, people. There is definitely something weird about the way IMU speaks. The use of archaic biblical English, phrases like thou shalt, and other old-fashioned pronouns. It's not just stylistic flair. It feels like a deliberate choice by order to hint at IMU's ancient, possibly divine or infernal origins. This kind of language invokes sacred or cursed texts, reinforcing the idea that IMU embodies something beyond a normal human ruler, maybe a god, demon, or spirit tied to the very foundations of the world. Now, remember the holy text? The ancient script that holds the creation myth of the world. In its first version, we read, "Within the earth there was fire. Mankind succumbed to greed and touched the forbidden sun. The enslaved prayed, and the sun god appeared. The earth god raged, and with its serpent of hellfire shrouded the world in death and darkness. And they will never meet." In this version, the earth god is a monstrous entity, possibly the original ruler. This god enslaved mankind to mine the mother flame, and its weapon was a serpent of hellfire. That serpent, I believe, is IMU in their earliest form, the original chaos bringer, the one who used the buccaneers as slaves, likely due to their unique biology, their strength, their capacity to hold something special. This was the first age. Then came the second age. We get another version of the holy text. "Within the void there was breath. The forest god tamed demons, and the sun spread the fires of war. Those of the half-moon dreamed, those of the moon dreamed. Man killed the sun and became god, and the sea god stormed, and they will never meet." Now IMU resurfaces, reborn as the forest god. The dragon in the mirror perched on the tree of Eve, that's IMU. Again. Vegapunk warned us not to romanticize the ancient kingdom, and now we see why. This wasn't a fight of good versus evil. It was a war over resources, over power, over survival. The people who would become the world government were losing that war, so they made a pact. They bowed to IMU, the forest god, to survive. But they weren't the only ones. A faction of the ancient kingdom who didn't agree with the others, those of the half-moon, the D-clan, also made a deal with IMU. They accepted their gift, perhaps unknowingly in a final stand against those of the full moon, which I believe to be Blackbeard's race. And my guess is the 20 kingdoms for a while were their allies alongside the other races. But then came Joy Boy, a rebel among rebels. He was given power but refused to use it for war. Or maybe the fruit sought him out in a similar fashion as to how it sought out Luffy. He didn't want to rule or destroy, he wanted to be free, the first pirate, the freest man in the world. And that's what broke their alliance. When the world government destroyed the ancient kingdom, they expected the D-clan to help build the new world. Instead, they kept the power IMU gave them, the devil fruits. They chose freedom over submission. IMU was betrayed, so they cast them out into the sea. And from then on, the sea has hated those who consume devil fruits. Why? Maybe because they are ancient gifts. Gifts stolen from the earth god and twisted by IMU. They belong to the gods, not to man. This could be any of the ancient races on the moon. That's why the sea rejects them. That's why the users drown. The ocean remembers. Think of it this way. The earth god is the original god, and IMU is the serpent. Lucifer, a bringer of forbidden knowledge, false power, and catastrophic betrayal. And Joy Boy, he never saw it coming. Zunisha tried to warn him, but it was too late. Imu rose again as the sea god after flooding the world. Actually, this makes a lot of sense because that's actually a valid reason for Imu to hate Nefertari D. Lily. Because after the betrayal, Imu wanted to erase any idea of resistance, and the best way to do that would be to erase the people of the D and their history. But Lily was part of the people that preserved that history in the form of the poneglyphs. After this, the celestial dragons, those who submitted, became gods by name but servants in truth, servants to the sea serpent. But why this shadowy form? Why this demonic image? Because it's not just demonic, it's mythological. Imu spelled backward is Umi, the Japanese word for sea. But there's more. In Japanese folklore, there's the Umibozu, a mysterious sea spirit feared by sailors. It shapeshifts. It changes appearance. In some stories, it takes the form of a blind monk or a woman. In others, it challenges sailors with riddles or swimming contests. And if you fail, you get swallowed whole. That's exactly what happened with Brogy. He challenged Imu, he fought, and then he was transformed. Not just killed, transformed through a devil contract, which only activates if you attack Imu. That seems to be the condition. I'm not actually sure about that. So, according to my understanding, you have to initiate violence, make the pact, whether you know it or not. But I wonder if it can be reversed or Dory and Brogy are stuck like this. Worse, if they are now completely under Imu's control to the extent that they could easily lose their lives like Saint J. Garcia Saturn. So in some regions of Japan, there are legends that if you see an Umibozu, you will live a long life. Makes you wonder. The Gorosei have been alive for centuries. They're practically immortal. Their longevity is a side effect of their exposure to Imu. Or perhaps their acceptance of the devil contract without resistance? One tale from Kuwana says the Umibozu appears at the end of the month and asks, "Am I fearsome?" If the sailor answers wisely, it vanishes. If they act scared, it attacks. This is exactly the psychological warfare Imu plays. Fear is the entry point, submission is the contract, resistance is the transformation. And now the symbolism is unmistakable. Luffy, or rather Nika, represents hope, joy, freedom. He doesn't force anyone. He inspires. He dances in battle. And Imu is the exact opposite. The embodiment of control, of submission, of fear. When Brogy and Dory showed up with black wings and glowing eyes, they didn't seem like themselves. Their will was gone. They weren't corrupted by temptation, they were overridden. That's what makes it worse. It's not seduction, it's invasion. Contrast that with Luffy, who awakens the true self in others. He helped Bonnie embrace her identity and even mimic Nika's abilities. He pulled Wano out of the darkness. He uplifted Nami, Robin, Chopper, all of them. That's what Oda is setting up. A clash between the two absolute forces. Hope versus control. Freedom versus fear. Nika versus Imu. And maybe that's the story that was always being told. A world born of fire, ruled by the earth god, destroyed by the serpent. A new world tamed by the forest god, flooded by the sea god. And now, a fine world awaiting rebirth. The Pirate King isn't just someone who conquers the sea. I believe he's the one who frees it. Because you have to remember, we still don't know what Luffy's true dream is. And that true dream could be something so ridiculous that it just breaks the cycle of control that Imu has held for centuries. Now there's more to unravel, especially with the strange relationship between the D clan and the people of the Full Moon, who I think are Blackbeard's people. But this is the core. Imu was never human, and the war we're witnessing isn't just between pirates and marines, it's between gods and men, between the original scene of control and the final act of liberation.